Brian, as always, appreciate the time. Look forward to talking to you each and every week. Let's talk some college football. Not a ton of marquee matchups this week as we're still pretty early in the season, but there are a few ranked teams taking each other on this week. And we'll start in our neck of the woods, at least in our state here. Notre Dame will host Georgia Tech in a battle of two teams that are ranked. Notre Dame obviously comes in with its fair share of injuries. Zaire's out. They've got the running backs gone. The tight end is gone. It's DeShone Kaiser's team to run at this point in time. With all the injuries, especially the Zaire injury that knocks him out for the rest of the season, is there still hope there for Notre Dame that they could make a push to be one of the teams in the college football playoff when the season wraps up in November, December?
I don't think they're dead in the water in any sort of way. This is just a bad game to have right now, with having to break DeShone Kaiser in as a starter. Because of Georgia Tech being a unique opponent with their option offense, if Notre Dame were to fall behind in this game, that would require them to have Kaiser really make some big plays in his first start. He was electric at the end of the Virginia game, but I think that might have been more off adrenaline and the heat of the moment. But now having a week to prepare, he could end up having to force some things, and it could end up being a problem if he were to make mistakes, because Georgia Tech is going to be able to run the ball very well, and at times will probably be leading this game, and that can lead to some forcing of stuff.
Now, last time Notre Dame made a run in a national championship, and they made it all the way to the national championship game, they had kind of a similar situation. Everett Golson was a freshman quarterback, and they really leaned heavily on that defense to carry them through that season. Do they have that kind of a defense, in your opinion, again this year, that can bear the weight of any DeShone Kaiser and offensive struggles they might have?
For the most part, I think they do. This is a very strong defense, and now with those losses on the offensive side, the defense is the better half right now. And again, just having this kind of an opponent right now, Notre Dame could make the playoff with a loss because they have a strong schedule, and this might be the time where they could lose this game and still get there if they're able to play well the rest of the way and be convincing with their victories. Jalen Smith, a couple other guys on that defense are going to be in the NFL next year or 2 years from now. So they have the talent to do that, which is what it was a few years ago with Manti Te'o and others. So that is a unit that can carry if needed, but just this is a bad game to have that be the start for that.
Brian Pedersen, our guest, college football feature writer for Bleacher Report. It's Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville 105.3, and online, ESPNEvansville.com. Let's move to the one of the other independent teams, Brian, BYU, taking on UCLA. Obviously, this will be a big test for BYU. They've won with Hail Marys the last 2 weeks to remain undefeated on the season. Is this something that BYU can keep up, or does the Cinderella story, if you want to call it that, wrap up this weekend with UCLA?
I think that the run comes to an end with this one because UCLA is far better than what BYU has faced the first 2 weeks. Those were flawed teams in Nebraska and Boise State, and they were able to do just enough to win and be able to come out on top, to be in a position where they could hit a Hail Mary or a long pass at the end to be able to do that. UCLA is a far better team. They've got a freshman quarterback just like BYU who's putting up these great numbers, but they have so much more than that. They have a great running back in Paul Perkins. They have an excellent defense that is going to be getting to him more than Nebraska and Boise State did. So if BYU were to somehow do the same thing and make this their theme of the year, I think a lot of the country is going to rally around them because it is a great story.
Well, the Pac is a conference that a lot of people have kind of come out and said, is a very good conference this year in the Power Fives. How good are they, and where do they rank, with the Power Fives? The no-brainer is to come out and say the SEC is always the best football conference, but the Pac's getting pretty good.
Pac-12 is going to turn out fine. They've just had a bad start. They don't have any quality wins. They're more noted for the losses they've had, having a team lose at home to an FCS school, having Stanford and Arizona State and Oregon, some of the most high-profile teams, losing their big major matchups to other power teams. They just don't have the reputation right now early in the season. I think as the year goes on, when you get into the conference play, you're going to get to see the quality of it. Next week is probably the biggest week for the Pac-12 for a while this year. You're going to have the 6 best teams in the league playing each other. Oregon's going to go against Utah, Arizona against UCLA, and Arizona State against USC. It's going to be an opportunity to see how great everybody is against each other. Unfortunately, though, that's going to mean that some of them are going to be picking up possibly their second loss very early in the season. So from a national standpoint, it might look like the Pac-12 is not really that good, but it's just more showing how deep that conference is.
Well, and isn't that something, too, now with the way that we actually have a living, breathing committee that looks at who's going to play for the trophy instead of a computer spitting out numbers? That kind of plays into it as well as the season goes on, does it not? You try to schedule the toughest schedule you can, and you schedule in with tough conferences like the Pac-12, the SEC, and then when the conference as a whole kind of struggles or beats up on each other, does that bring the strength of schedule down for these teams outside of that conference that play them?
Not so much. I mean, it's when you have so many quality teams in a league, they're going to beat up on each other, and there's going to be some cannibalization. The SEC last year, as you saw, that league was so great on the West side, but somebody has to beat somebody else each week when they start playing each other. And you had a team like Arkansas that was so well regarded at the end of the year, went 2-6 in their conference. So someone's going to have to lose those games. There aren't enough teams that they can all beat up on to get the to pad their numbers. And what can be unfortunate is having these big games early in the season before the committee starts putting out their rankings. We don't know how much they're paying attention to these early games because they're not having the week-by-week scrutiny and having to answer to it.
Brian Pedersen, our guest, featured writer for Bleacher Report's college football coverage. It's Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville, 105.3 and online, ESPNEvansville.com. I want to stick with this game just real quick, Brian, and let's play pretend here. Let's play make-believe and say BYU gets past this UCLA team and there's a little fairy dust left in the bag there and they're able to pull out a win here. If they run the table, should they be considered for the New Year's Six?
Well, they're not eligible for the group of 5 spot that goes to a champion from one of the non-power conferences because they're independent. So the only way they'd be able to get in would be as part of the 14 playoff. And I think it would be very, very difficult for them to do that, even if they were to run the table, because that would mean they've already beat BYU, they've already beat Nebraska, so that's a Big Ten win. Later in the year, they have to go to Michigan next week, so that'd be another Big Ten win. They play Missouri in Kansas City later in the year, so that'd be an SEC win plus this UCLA game. In between, though, is a lot of Mountain West teams, American Athletic Conference teams, an FCS team. Overall, if they were eligible for the group of 5, it would definitely get them that spot, but they're not going to be able to get into the playoffs unless suddenly everybody of power had 2 losses in all the major conferences.
Well, let's move over to one of those major conferences. 2 big games in the SEC this weekend, Auburn, LSU. Auburn tumbles, takes a big fall in the top 25 rankings after that overtime win against Jacksonville State. A lot of people with high hopes on Auburn coming into this season, thinking that they very well could come out as the SEC champion over an Alabama team. Are Auburn, with that performance last week, are they overrated, or is it just simply that team overlooked a lower quality opponent, let's say?
There's a little bit of both there. That there was certainly some not giving Jacksonville State credit, looking at them simply as a paycheck opponent and playing that way. And that happens from time to time, and they were very, very fortunate that Jacksonville State played conservative and made some mistakes in the final moments to be able to have that go to overtime and then win. But there is some overratedness to it. There was a lot of hype about Jeremy Johnson, the quarterback, throughout the offseason, that this is going to be such a different Auburn team, that they could throw the ball, they're going to be very varied and balanced and explosive. And Johnson has had some of the worst interceptions that I've ever seen as a quarterback, where he's throwing balls directly to the defenders as if he doesn't even see them, and you wonder how he made it through the entire spring and preseason playing that way, or if suddenly in the face of real competition he's just struggling. And that's throwing them for a loop, because that they've got their run game and they've got a slightly improved defense, but the defense still breaks down from time to time, and I don't know if it'll really be able to hold up in the SEC.
Who do you like in that game between Auburn and LSU?
It's hard to bet against LSU playing at home. I know that they lost there last year to Mississippi State and to Alabama, but in general, they should be given the benefit of the doubt always at home. This past week, going to Mississippi State and winning, it wasn't the most impressive victory, but we saw what kind of team they're going to be. Just give the ball to Leonard Fournette, let him beat people up with his running, and try to keep the quarterback from having to make too many mistakes, but then also have used the defense to fluster an opponent. They kept Dak Prescott, Mississippi State's great mobile quarterback, from doing any sort of running, and I wouldn't be surprised if they are able to shut down the run enough against Auburn to force them to have to pass more, and we've already seen how that hasn't really worked for them.
Brian Pedersen, our guest, college football featured writer for Bleacher Report. You can also find him on Twitter at RealBJP. It's Ford and O'Brien, ESPN Evansville 105.3 and online, ESPNEvansville.com. Let's jump over to that Ole Miss-Alabama game for just a minute, Brian, then we'll let you go. A big game. Ole Miss gets the win over Alabama last year. The game's in Tuscaloosa this year. Who has more to lose with this game coming into it on Saturday?
There's still more pressure on Alabama than there would be on Ole Miss because they're playing at home. This is one of the revenge games, I believe, that in his time at LSU and Alabama, only twice has Nick Saban lost a game to a team, the time after having lost to them previously, so he usually gets his revenge. But also, Alabama is expected to win all of these games, whereas Ole Miss is off to a hot start, but we really don't know how good they are. Scoring 149 points is amazing, but it came against an FCS school and Fresno State. If they were to come out of this game with a win, it would incredibly boost their profile, whereas Alabama would just be, well, okay, they were supposed to win this game. They're the better team. So they wouldn't have as much to gain, but they would have far more to lose.
Does Ole Miss have a real chance at pulling this off in Tuscaloosa? Like you said, it's very rare for a Nick Saban team to lose to that team, the same team in consecutive years.
I believe the last time the Rebels won in Tuscaloosa was 1988, so it's going to be a very difficult task. They've got some talent there. I think if they're going to win this game, they're going to have to try to win a very low-scoring game, something similar to last year in Oxford. I believe it was 23-17. Really play it down low and just hit a couple big plays. I wouldn't be surprised to see them be competitive for about a half, but I think Alabama's just too strong.
That's Brian Pedersen, featured writer for Bleacher Report's college football coverage. Find him on Twitter at RealBJP. Brian, as always, appreciate the time. Great stuff. We'll talk again next week.
Thanks a lot.